Hey, Hawkeye fans, long awaited Hawk Central podcast to discuss the Big Ten women's basketball tournament. And later, Tyler Tachman will join us to talk about the disappointing men's result from last night, but we're not going to talk about that yet. Dargan, Southard, and myself were up in Minneapolis all weekend. It was a quick weekend, Dargan, 3 games in less than 3 days. And I just rewatched the second half of Iowa's 94-89 win against Nebraska in the Big Ten championship game. It was pretty remarkable to watch again. Really remarkable performance. Iowa's chances to win with a little over 2 minutes to go in regulation, 0.9%, according to ESPN's tracker. So really improbable, but when you know Iowa has Caitlin Clark, maybe not so improbable.
Yeah, I mean, down 8 with 2.5 minutes to go, for everyone that watches a lot of college basketball knows that you need about 15 things to go right from there to the end of the game. And if one of them, gets knocked off track, then, you're probably not going to get it done. But, going back and watching the last, really from that point to the end of the game, I mean, you could tell that Iowa was so much more, even though they had been down the whole game, they were just so much more comfortable in winning time in a close, tight, tension-filled setting. And it showed because, obviously Caitlin is the headliner, but she had a horrendous first half. And that was, if you asked her, she'd probably add a few more adjectives to it. Took a nice swing on a bench chair during one of the timeouts. So for her to start like that and come back and hit, obviously the big 3 that got them from 8 to 5, that was kind of a big mental boost. The 3 in overtime that put them ahead for good. But to be honest, what I thought was Clark's most mature play of the final stretch was when I was down to 77-75, there's about 30 or 40 seconds left, somewhere in there. And Clark had just, hit a big 3. So it would have been easy for her to just go down, hey, I'm going to give us the lead here, fire a 3. And, it may have gone in, but for her to know the time and score, drive hard, get 2 points. And that was a situation where if you go back to the game in Lincoln,
I was just thinking that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. After Nebraska hits their big 3 to go up, Iowa's down 1.
Great
Caitlin
point.
has a runner to the right, and it's not a very, it's not exactly a clean look. And so that kind of changed the final 30 seconds. So for her to go down, just tie the game there. Sometimes when you get to overtime, depending on how the game went, it can feel like a win or a loss. But for Iowa to get that game to overtime certainly felt like a win. And so, then you could, as she said, go and take it from there. So not that we didn't think that Caitlin Clark, could lead a comeback like this, but I think it's big given that Iowa really hasn't dealt with a game like this and adversity like this very often this year, going through their losses. It wasn't a situation where they had been.
They usually
trailing.
melted down. The one time they did trail Indiana by 11 at half, and they just never got back. Yeah, but this time they did, and that was what was kind of cool about it. And we'll get into the comeback here, I guess, as we go. But that's a great point. I love that you brought the Nebraska parallel back to that loss we both covered on Super Bowl Sunday. It was so jarring. Something that Lisa Bluter reminded her team of at halftime. She said, hey, we were down 12 to these guys in the fourth quarter. It was actually 14, or ahead by 14 in the fourth quarter in Lincoln. And they got us back. So let's get them back. And that's kind of what happened in this one. So, just looking back at the box score, I thought, or the second half. Okay. So Clark had 4 points on 2 of 13 shooting at halftime. She comes out in the second half and delivers a mid-range jumper on the very first possession. Iowa was down 11 at that point, a mid-range. I thought that was huge. It seemed to like unlock her game. And then not too long later, she canned a 3. And then I was right by where we were sitting right on the table. And she just goes, like pumped her fist, like finally, It wasn't like the Penn State game where she finally hit one where it was like, finally, it was like
It was a little tighter than that.
Yeah, and
Right.
so she was into it. And by the way, she wanted a foul and one on that bucket to tie it and over
She
to
did.
go
Yes.
no.
She was very adamant about that.
And when I watched the replay, she probably should have got one. But I like that she drove to the hoop to try to draw contact. I think that was the smart thing to do. And also give a ton of credit to Hannah Stolke on the defensive end there after Nebraska calls timeout, 77-77, 9 seconds left. They got Jazz Shelley, a ball screen up top, and Stolke really hustled to just smother Shelley and not give her any chance at a shot there. Shelley had to get rid of it. I think it was Nisley that tried to throw up the desperation shot at the end of regulation. I could be wrong there, but it wasn't a good shot. So Iowa, sometimes gets criticized for its defense, but really got a bunch of defense. You have to have defensive stops to make up that kind of ground, and they did.
Yeah, and I mean, even in the possessions before that, as I was trying to make a push, the big three by Caitlin, the big three by Martin, those don't mean anything if you don't get the defensive stops on the other end to pair with it. And so, another big moment that I didn't, the bullets were flying there late. So, but when Iowa this is in overtime, they are up 2 going to the line. Kate Martin's going to the line. She rolls in the first free throw, hit a lot of rim. So that puts Iowa up 3. And then she leaves the second free throw way short. And so, if Nebraska gets that rebound, they're down 3 with, 20 seconds to go or something like that. Still need a big play, but it's much more reasonable. But Stolke goes up and grabs that O board off the missed free throw, just totally out jumped Markowski on that play. And then obviously she goes back to the line, and her mental game has obviously been a big key this season. The improvement of it as her role has grown to what it is now. And for her to bounce back immediately after missing 2 free throws that could have been crucial, if things had bounced the right way for Nebraska, those could have been 2 crucial misses. Instead, she comes back, gets a big O board, hits 2 more free throws, and that kind of wrapped it up. So I think this weekend was big for everybody to kind of, for some people, maybe get some things out of their system. If it, Caitlin obviously didn't have a great shooting weekend, pretty much, by her standards all the way through, but was still able to stay in mentally and stay locked in and make big plays down the stretch. And then obviously, the supporting cast, pretty much all of them had some big moment at some point this weekend. So
yeah,
if you're looking for, what kind of is the big picture benefit of this weekend, obviously winning a 3rd straight Big Ten tournament title is not an accomplishment to diminish, but obviously the goals are still bigger up ahead. And I think getting everybody's confidence ascending at the right time, all the way through the roster was a big development this weekend.
Yeah, I do want to give a shout to Taylor McCabe, Kylie Feuerbach, and Addie O'Grady. Even AJ Ediger gave them some bench production over the course of the weekend. And one thing on your Stolke rebound comment that I didn't write about, it just triggered to my mind, was there was a point in that overtime where Bluter subbed in Addison O'Grady. She didn't sub much late in the game at all. She rode those 5 starters because Stolke was kind of gassed. And O'Grady did fine. She gave him 1 rebound, I think, in there. But I just wonder if that little rest maybe helps Stolke get that last rebound over Markowski, who certainly had to be tired. They were playing their 4th game in 4 days. I mean, it's little coaching moments like that, I feel like, that sometimes you look back on and you find little edges for sure. And I didn't love my column. I've improved it a ton this morning, but the idea of it was what I was more excited about. I wish I could have executed it better, but it was the 5 players in that starting lineup all had their stories kind of converge in this championship game. You had a Fulter just, after the 6th player snub, so to speak, that Caitlin's still not letting go.
No, she is not. As we know, Caitlin does not always let things go very easily. She is very adamant that Sydney should have won.
Hey, she's right. Yeah, I think she's right. I mean, yeah. So we didn't have a vote in that, by the way. But anyway, Fulter makes the all-tournament team and just she kind of kept Iowa in that game in the first half when Caitlin was struggling. So give her that. Stolke, we mentioned 25 points in that championship game. I mean, it was kind of a quiet 25, wasn't it? I mean, geez, she was fantastic. And then just to have the free throw, I just rewatched it this morning. Just it bounces on the rim, hits the glass, circles the drain. And oh man, she was so excited on that one winning.
Yeah,
and that was like
she kind of leaned that one in at the free throw line.
Yeah, so to go 2 for 2 with 17 seconds left. Yes, she missed a couple earlier, but she only missed 2 in the whole tournament. Her free throw game is ascended. Kate Martin, it was crazy. They just left her wide open 3 times, and she made all 3 three-pointers. Last minute of regulation and 2 in overtime. She comes up clutch, and then we haven't mentioned the Gabby Marshall block. To me, it was the highlight of the tournament. Just a clean swat to kind of almost punctuate the championship. We mentioned Caitlin. I mean, setting all kinds of records. I mean, every single game she set some kind of new record. So those 5, Dargan, the way they're playing right now, love it. And if they get anything out of Molly Davis, that obviously would be great. I would say, I don't know. We'll see what Lisa Bluter says on Selection Sunday. But with Molly, I just would not hold out hope that she's going to be able to return at all. I mean, you hope she does. But what they've got, even if Molly can provide, 6 minutes off the bench, that would be beneficial.
Yeah, and I mean, her coming back into any game, I mean, you saw you heard the ovations that she got. She might have been maybe the most popular player there for Iowa fans. So, obviously, if she returns at any point and offers anything, that could be a huge emotional lift, depending on where it comes. And, I thought it was interesting that you mentioned all the little details that needed down the stretch. And there was a couple that Caitlin, really generated. One was the first Martin 3 that got toward the end of regulation. I mean, if Caitlin isn't doing what she's doing beforehand, then the double doesn't come. And I mean, it was brief. Like it was just a couple of steps up from the Nebraska defender, and that's all Caitlin needed to hit that. And then if you go to the possession I was talking about earlier, where she tied the game at 77, she's kind of driving in the lane, and I think it might have been Shelley was right on her hip. And then Caitlin kind of makes this little pause where she kind of turns her hips, back toward the bench, and then, squares back up and turns the corner. And just that little turn knocked Shelley off her defense just by 1 step. And that's all Caitlin needed to get that bucket. So the rewatch is honestly it's always better than live, especially in an environment like that. And you really get to appreciate those little things that make a huge difference. But, you look at the beginning of the weekend, I don't think anybody was concerned that Sydney Fulter, couldn't handle an elevated role. Obviously, a lot of people have been calling for that for a while, but this is still a player who was on the team last year, but had a significantly reduced role compared to now. And for her to get, right in the middle of this, March energy that's going to be so strong coming forward, even though she's a veteran, I think that was huge for her to get in that environment, get comfortable with, what she's going to be asked to do probably the rest of the season. And obviously made a huge difference. And that's the type of performances that I was going to need moving forward. Obviously Caitlin's got to do her thing. The seniors have to do their thing. Gabby and Kate, Stolke's got to be good, but you're going to need, a Sydney Fulter 15-point game here, or,
Right.
An 8 rebound game from Sydney Fulter that comes in pivotal spots. So, I think, going into yesterday, given how Iowa had kind of cruised to, not kind of, very much cruised to Sunday, if Sunday had been a cruise control game, I think there could have been benefit in that, just because there's going to be so much emotional moments coming up with, the tournament and Caitlin's career ending, that to go down there and not burn a ton of energy could have been beneficial. But for it to unfold the way that it did, and for Iowa to survive, I think mentally, even though this team has a ton of experience, I think could very well be a huge point that kind of, kickstarts another run here. And obviously we saw that happen last year with, success down the stretch carrying over into the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, Bluter unloaded the tank there in the finale. A Fulter 39 minutes, Clark 44 minutes, Marshall and Stolke 40 minutes each. I bet that's got to be a career high for Stolke, who rolled her ankle the day before. We were just, we were trying to verify if she was gonna, go. We assumed she would, but yeah, and then Martin 35. So they only 3 shot attempts from the bench in that game. So that was, you could see they can do that, lean on the starters, but Iowa had done a good job managing its minutes leading up to this ball game, end up out rebounding Nebraska 48-43. Huskers played great, man. I mean, Huskers, what a great tournament they had. Jazz Shelley is elite. Really impressed with that team. And let's, in a way, Dargan, that helps us look ahead, because Nebraska is kind of viewed as like a 8-9 seed in the NCAA tournament. So this is the type of second round test you're going to get in Carver Hawkeye Arena in a couple of weeks, potentially. And you got to fight these things off and find a way. And heck, I mean, playing a 4 seed in the Sweet 16 or something like that. I mean, you're going to have to. It's not going to be easy to get to the Final Four, even though Iowa is right now projected as the number 2 overall seed by Charlie Cream after Stanford loses in the Pac-12 title game. It's great for Iowa, but also just a reminder that it's not easy to survive and advance at this time of year.
No, and I mean, as I was watching yesterday's game unfold, given, where Nebraska is in the projections, that's honestly what the energy felt like. It felt like, the Georgia game. And obviously we've seen the last 2 years, that second round game has been, among the toughest for Iowa to get through. And so, obviously, it's easy to say, how does Iowa compare to LSU? How does Iowa compare to South Carolina or Stanford or Texas or USC? But there's going to be challenges before any of those teams pop up on the board. And, it may not be a pretty game, in all likelihood, it won't be, just that's how things go in the NCAA tournament. From this point forward, style points and, beauty points don't matter anymore. You just got to win the games. And it feels like Iowa has, over this run, over this entire stretch of elite, basketball, has really kind of honed in on being able to, hey, if everything, hasn't gone great up until winning time and we're in the game, then we feel confident that we can take it no matter what has happened prior. So, I think mentally I was in a good spot. I think this next week off, it's always kind of awkward on the Power 5 women's side, because they play their tournaments kind of in reverse or inverse of the men.
Right.
They go on the first weekend and then the mid-majors go on the second weekend. So I was going to have, almost 2 weeks until they play again. And so I think, it'll be a good stretch for everybody to kind of come down from Minneapolis, decompress a little bit, and then fire it back up with, as you said, it feels like I was going to, has locked up a 1 seed. I don't think that's an issue.
No.
Whether it's Albany or Portland, I think is still up in the air. Albany seems to be more in play now that Ohio State's not on the 1 line. So that'll kind of be something to watch on Selection Sunday. But, I think Iowa feels pretty good where it's at right now, and should be excited for what's ahead.
Yeah, I know. So Charlie Cream has USC and Stanford as a 1 currently. Texas has a chance to play for a Big 12 title. Maybe Texas moves up and takes a 1. I guess he's on the ball, so he probably knows, but I still don't necessarily agree that Ohio State should have fallen off the 1 line for sure. but I guess we'll see. I mean, that was they lost a tough game in Iowa City. I mean, almost an impossible game to win on Caitlin Clark's senior day. And then, Maryland's a really good team. I mean, I know it was an ugly loss, for Ohio State, but anyway, we'll see. That will shake out. UConn's got a Big East championship game tonight. On that note, Dargan, the bracket that Cream has Iowa as a 1 and Albany right now, UCLA as a 2. So I guess that would put them as the 7th overall seed.
Mm-hmm.
And then UConn as a 3. I wonder if that will happen, because that's a home situation for UConn potentially in an Elite 8 against Iowa, which would be I mean, they picked the sites way ahead of time, Albany, Portland. You can't do anything about that. So I'm curious if that would happen, and if I don't know, would that be just? What do you think? You've covered this women's tournament a long time. Is that a justifiable bracket at this point to maybe put Iowa at a home court disadvantage for one of the first times this year?
Yeah, I mean, so just to geographically set it up, Storrs is about 2 hours and 10 minutes away from Albany. So that would, that would be a home game, more or less, obviously, or I shouldn't say a home game, but it would be at worst 50-50, and Iowa fans would really have to, it would kind of be their ultimate challenge as Iowa fans to go up there, try to combat the UConn support in their backyard. I think it's certainly possible that it could happen. There has been times over the years where the committee tries to kind of, I guess, sneak in little things that could possibly happen. And that would certainly be one of them, kind of talking about like, Cyhawk was supposed to happen in the Sweet 16 a couple of years ago. I could see, I know UConn has been sent when the Sweet 16 side has been in the Northeast. UConn usually gets sent up there. So that, that certainly feels reasonable, even though it would kind of be a bit of a screw for Iowa to be the number 2 overall seed and have to play UConn and Albany. But again, I think Iowa kind of feels confident whatever it gets. I think that was the message coming off the podium yesterday. Hey, we feel like we should be a 1 seed, but matchups often matter more so than who's seeded 1 through 8. So I think Iowa kind of feels like they have a good handle on the NCAA tournament, and I know they won't be happy if that UConn in Albany game materializes, but I think it would be interesting to kind of compare and contrast when they met in the NCAA tournament Caitlin's freshman year. To come back around and meet again in her senior year would kind of be a nice vantage point into the growth that's happened during her time. So I would be excited for it. Iowa probably would say otherwise, but I guess we'll just have to see how everything shakes out.
Yeah, I'm not telling Iowa fans what to do, because who knows what's going to happen, but I don't even know if there's tickets available in Albany. There probably isn't, but you might want to start scoping those out. If you want to try to make that, even out the crowds potentially if UConn's over there. I would think Iowa would prefer, if you give them that bracket, they would prefer to go to Portland, even though UCLA would be out there. Because I don't see that as being an advantage for UCLA. I mean,
LA's still like 16 hours. Yeah, LA's still like 16 hours from Portland.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah. The West is so big, man.
I know. It's absurd.
Yeah. I assume I don't want to transition to Tyler just yet, but is he waiting for us?
Yeah, he's on it.
Okay, cool. All right. Here's the last point I wanted to make about the women, and then I'll maybe give you the last word on the women, and we can move to the men for our listeners out there. I just want to say, like, this whole season has been such a circus. I've used that word a lot. But for Iowa to it's been 5 months basically since the crossover at Kinnick. I mean, this has been a long season. To finish 29-4 and as the number 2 overall seed and a Big Ten tournament champion, that's quite a success. I wondered how they would navigate this whole deal. I wondered if the pressure would get to them. It just seems like they're playing. Like, I felt like, I don't want to. I want to say, I don't want to say it wasn't fun, but like the beat was starting to like, it was just starting to feel like too much almost at
A
certain
show.
points of this year. Um, Not about our job, but just partly about our job, but mostly just about the whole thing. Like it was just like so much with all the attention on Caitlin. But I felt like this week, my feel was everything just felt fun again. Like everything just
Yeah.
felt like normal, like last year, like when you're having this magical stuff. And I feel like the players sense that too. And we saw that almost since Caitlin made her WNBA decision. I feel like it's changed the dynamic of the rest of the season, how everyone consumes it, the urgency with which everyone is playing, the fun and joy with which everyone is playing, because it's about the team now. It's not about Caitlin anymore.
Yeah, I think depending on what happens this next month, you could definitely go back and look. And again, I'm sure Caitlin's teammates knew she was going to the WNBA a decent amount of time before publicly announcing it, as did the coaches, I'm sure. So, but for her to put that out there and have it be public, I think you could look back and say that that could be a pivotal moment in this season because, again, you think about yesterday's press conference without that announcement. I mean, how many questions would have been, "Hey, is this your last Big Ten tournament? Is this your last Big Ten matchup?" You would have had those questions all weekend, and they certainly would have been there all in the coming press conferences. So that eliminated a huge potential distraction right there. And again, if you want to look at maybe the biggest benefit of this season in the spotlight, it's what it can mean right now because this team has really been going through NCAA tournament-esque settings the whole season, and that's not I feel like that cliche gets used a little too much coming down the stretch. Oh, it feels like March. This is March, but really, I mean, you play in sold-out buildings all year long. You have the fans line up so early. You have the fan scene afterwards. I mean, it feels like that this team is as prepared as it could be for everything that's coming, which we know is going to be high pressure, tension packed, lots of emotion. And so it feels like that this season, because Iowa was able to navigate it successfully the way that it has, really puts it puts them in a spot to where they should feel mentally as strong as, really anybody in the tournament.
Great stuff, Dargan. It's a miracle my kids haven't charged in here yet. They're like, we're sleeping in. It's spring break. And
Oh man,
like
spring break.
I'm hearing thumping upstairs. So who knows? We could get a guest appearance from one of my kids. Most likely my daughter. But anyway, thank you, Dargan. It was a lot of fun out there. I guess I'll probably see you on Selection Sunday in Iowa City, and we'll have the actual brackets then. So at this point, we'll bring on my buddy Tyler Tachman. Got some bedhead going. I love it. No.
It's just my regular hair.
Okay.
We'll go with that. We'll go with that.
Good to talk to you again. I wish I could have been in both places yesterday. I know it didn't go well for the Iowa men. The Hawkeyes lose to the Illini 73-61. I will say, I don't know if this is legal. It probably isn't, but I was watching the game on YouTube the whole drive back from Minneapolis. Obviously couldn't tweet about it or anything like that, but when I crossed the border, Iowa was down 30-9, Tyler. So just not the performance you're looking for with an NCAA tournament bid on the line.
It was pretty much their worst offensive performance of the season at a time where they just absolutely could not afford it. And because there was so much stakes on this game, and Iowa had done such a good job to at least put themselves in a position to try to work their way into the field. Obviously entering Sunday, winning 4 of their last 5, one of the hottest teams in the Big Ten. And they actually did enough defensively against Illinois. Terrence Shannon Jr. was really good. They didn't really slow him down enough, but it was the offense really. They put up 61 points, which based on what I could tell was their lowest total of the season. Their also field goal percentage was tied for worst this season. So it was just on a day where they just absolutely could not afford to do so. They just laid an egg, and it was just really bad timing for just a bad performance.
Yeah, and honestly, like again, I really didn't see the game. I kind of listened to it, while I was driving and looked down if like something cool happened or whatever. But they did a good job on Hawkins. 4 points. I mean, Shannon went crazy. Iowa's normally a good free throw shooting team. Like, didn't make its free throws. What'd they finish from the line? 8 of 13. I mean, this is like almost an 80% free throw shooting team. That was uncharacteristic. Sanford really the only player offensively that showed up. Dix did to an extent, but man, the 3 seniors on senior day. Let me just add it up here. 2 for 16 from the floor. Cricky, Perkins, McCaffery for a total of 9 points. I don't know. Patrick hit that 3 like right at the end, right? So you just didn't have a lot of help out there beyond Peyton Sanford.
Yeah, Sanford and Dix both in double figures. The 3 other starters combined for just 12 points. That's just not good enough. And then it was just a really bad start. They started the game 0 for 9 from the field, and they were getting good looks. Like, I think that's probably what makes it a little bit more frustrating is that they were getting good looks at the rim. They weren't going down. And then even in like the second half, they had a lot of looks right around the rim, getting to the basket. There were a few Tony Perkins had that, he could have finished, and whether or not there should have been a foul called, Fran McCaffery wasn't pleased with that. But those are ones that you just kind of have to put in a game like this. And this is the type of game where high stakes game where you have to be at your best or near it. And Iowa was just far from it. This was a game you have to kind of just take hold of, and you have to be the aggressors. You can't leave things up for chance. And Iowa they just look, I don't know if it was tight or they didn't look quite right. And I don't know, they had the
layoff. Do you think the layoff hurt him a little bit?
I mean, I don't think it helped them, because when you're hot, you're a hot team, you just want to keep playing. Like, that's what Iowa was winning for their last 5 entering Sunday. And I think you kind of just want to keep that rolling. And that's what you see happen teams come tournament time, whether that be the conference tournament or March Madness, is that they get on a roll and they just kind of keep things moving. And, maybe it didn't hurt them. This layoff didn't hurt them that much, but I also don't think it helped much. I think you want to get on the court as much as you can when you're playing well. So it might have disrupted their rhythm a little bit, but at the same time, that can't be an excuse. You have to find a way to come out. I mean, you should have fresh legs. On the flip side is that you're rested. You have a lot of time to prepare for Illinois, and they just did not look like they, were themselves at all.
Yeah, so I have not had a chance to watch Fran McCaffery's video or post-game press conference, so I'll probably ask dumb questions here. But did he say anything about like why Brock Harding didn't play more in the second half? I mean, Harding gave him that spark in the first half. I was surprised he didn't play more in the second half, especially with Perkins struggling. And also, I mean, gosh, Ben Cricky just did nothing in this game. I mean, any explanation about how that happened?
Yeah, if I remember right, someone asked about, going with Tony in the second half, and Fran kind of said that despite not scoring a lot, Tony was still doing some good things. He gave Brock a chance in the second. He did put Brock in the second half. It wasn't for as lengthy of a stretch as the first half, I believe. But, yeah, and the thing is now that Iowa, looking ahead.
Yeah, let's look ahead.
They probably need, at least 2 wins. But the thing in the Big Ten tournament to feel like they have a good chance. But the issue is this loss, it gives them a much tougher draw than if they had won. If they had won, they probably would have gotten Northwestern, and if they won the first game, now they're playing a red-hot Ohio State team who Iowa beat earlier this season, but this Ohio State team is drastically different than it was back then. They're 5-1 since Chris Holtmann was fired. They're one of the hottest teams in the Big Ten.
Along with Indiana. Along with Indiana. They're red hot.
That's game 1. If they were to win that, they get Illinois again, who they've lost twice by double digits this season. I'm not saying it's impossible for Iowa to beat Illinois, but that's just a really tough matchup. Illinois, I think, is really good. I think they can have a chance of making a run in the NCAA tournament. They have just about everything. And so it would take to get past Ohio State, and then it would basically take a reverse offensive performance of what they had on Sunday against Illinois in the Big Ten tournament to beat them. They'll have to be firing from all over the place. So it's unlikely at this point. They have their work cut out for them. It's kind of been the theme of the season, I guess, as Peyton Sanford has said, having their backs up against the wall. So they're going to have to do some damage in Minneapolis to really feel good going into Selection Sunday.
Yeah, for sure. I think the draw is not good, as you said, but at the same time, it does, again, as we've talked about, it's opportunity, because if you can beat Ohio State and you can beat Illinois, two big ifs, I think you're at least got yourself in the giving yourself a chance to be in the NCAA tournament field. And then you're probably looking at, well, you definitely would be looking at a quarterfinal matchup against Nebraska's the 3 seed, correct? And then Indiana's the 6, and then it's, probably Penn State is the 11. So you're probably going to catch Nebraska or Indiana in that semifinal. If you get there, that's winnable. So, I mean, I'm going to say go win 3 games in 3 days, and then you can make sure you're in the tournament. That's about the only thing. I mean, maybe 2 gets them there, but I think they probably got to win 3 to be sure.
Yeah, the really unfortunate thing about the way Iowa played is just the timing of it. Like, if this was a performance they had in early February, late January, they had been playing well up to it. They won 4 or 5 leading up to it. They drop a dud. You kind of feel like, okay, well, they're going to move past that. That was just kind of possibly a blip on the radar. The timing of it is what makes this so bad, is that Iowa just could not afford at this moment to play this poorly. And they kind of put themselves in that position with the missed opportunities earlier this season. So the margin for error, basically, they have to win at least 2 or 3 in a row here. So it's kind of another missed opportunity, because they could have kind of controlled their own destiny on Sunday, and they missed it.
Yeah, I would say let's save some time to preview the Big Ten tournament. Obviously, on Wednesday when we talk, you're going to get McCaffery and players again tomorrow, right?
Tuesday.
Is that right?
Tuesday.
Yeah. So, time to rally the troops, so to speak. Just big picture wise, 18 and 13. I'm not going to say, you're satisfied with that, but that's probably about what we expected on the fringe of the bubble this year. I feel like they've had an okay season. It's just like you said, when it ends like that, especially like going back to last year, they have a chance to clinch the number 2 seed in the Big Ten tournament on senior day, and they lose at home to Nebraska. It just sort of leaves you with a little bit of a sour feeling about the season. Like, big picture, 18 and 13, not bad, about what we expected. But the way it ended kind of, I feel like that's what you're left with if you're a fan, if you're consuming this team.
Yeah, and I feel like part of maybe what raised my expectations going into the season was the fact that it felt like Iowa kind of had a quiet confidence that they were going to surprise people. And you wouldn't expect a team to go into a season saying, "Oh, we're not going to be good. Like, you shouldn't come to watch us." But it did just feel like they kind of had they just had a little swagger to them that we're going to prove people wrong. And it just felt like that came way too late in the season. Like, it didn't kind of fully come to fruition the way that they had envisioned it. If they had the way that they playing at the end of the season, if they had done that earlier in February or in January and they had continued to grow, I think you feel a lot better of where they're at. But yeah, I mean, the record isn't terrible. But I think maybe what made me feel like they could be better was just how they talked about themselves before the season, and maybe some of what they had done in the past. And now, going a little bit into Big Ten tournament, like, they're going to have to rekindle some of that magic from 2022. I don't think they need to win it this season, but they have guys that were on that team: Patrick McCaffery, Tony Perkins, Peyton Sanford. So they have guys that have done it. They need to find a way to somehow have that translate to this season.
Well, thanks, Tyler. Thanks for being there. You've done a great job on the men's beat all season. I hope you guys out there appreciate everything Tyler's done. I mean, I've been doing mostly women's basketball and some offensive coordinator stuff this winter. So Tyler's really been, 90% of the men's beat, which I really appreciate. You've done an awesome job on your first year on the job. I hope you come back for another year.
One more year.
One more year.
No, I appreciate it. I enjoy doing this. So, I mean, it's my job. You don't got to thank me, but I appreciate it.
But anyway, I didn't get to, since I wasn't there yesterday, I hesitate to say much more on the men's game. But as we close, any last words about the men's game yesterday or the season?
I think we summed it up. I was, Peyton Sanford, a guy who is usually pretty positive. He was, I would say, fairly positive after the game. Like, obviously, he was disappointed they lost, but he kind of said, like, they've dealt with every hurdle that's come their way so far this season, and there's been a lot of them. So he said they're going to find a way to keep going. And there's been a lot of times that I've thought Iowa's just kind of been dead in the water this season. We go back to December, they lost 3 in a row in pretty bad fashion. 0-3 start in Big Ten play. There was that where they kind of went back between a loss and a win, and you're thinking they're never going to turn the corner. And they have managed to put themselves in this situation where they still have a chance. I don't feel confident they're going to do damage, but I didn't feel confident at other times this season, and they still kind of managed. So there's still a shot, I guess.
Yeah. A friend of mine pointed out that Iowa has only 2 losses this year against teams seeded 3 through 10 in the Big Ten tournament. But I think what really killed them this year was the home losses ultimately to Michigan and Maryland. If you talk about their resume, because those 2 teams were in the first or the early game. Michigan, obviously the clear last place team. And is Maryland like the 13? I mean, they're the 12 or 13 seed, right? They're the 12. So they lost 3 games to teams seeded 12 and 14 this year. So, they kind of wrote their own or dug their own grave, so to speak. And now they got to dig out of it. I would say win 3 games in 3 days. But if you beat Ohio State, you just kind of get that positive feeling again, and you never know. They say it's hard to beat a team 3 times, right?
Yeah.
So maybe Illinois, maybe Iowa can catch Illinois this time.
Yeah.
But they got to beat Ohio State first. Anyway, thanks, Tyler. Good stuff as always. Tyler Tachman, Chad Leistikow. Thanks earlier to Dargan Southard. We appreciate you joining